Good evening. My name is John H. and I am an alcoholic. Welcome to the Code Blue Big Book Action Seminar. What we're going to do in this seminar, guys, is we're going to go through the first 164 pages of our big book, our Guide to Freedom, and we're going to do exactly what it says. I myself am no big book guru. I am no spiritual wonder man. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a couple recovered alcoholics took me through the book. I did the work, and it saved my life. Now, as a result of that, I try to pass on what has been so freely given to me. Now, I borrow heavily from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes. I borrow heavily from that smartass Clancy. I borrow from Chuck C. I borrow from all of the giants who have gone before me. So please, get yourself a big book, large print I prefer, a highlighter and a pen, and bring your willingness. Get ready to change your life. Thanks for listening. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Peace. So, last week we finished up, and as usual, we don't have any papers today, but I forgot to talk a little bit about the sheet of paper that I gave out last week. But it's basically what we talked about in the chapter, what is the solution? And, what I got out of that chapter was that we have two powers that are available to us in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the first power is the power of the meetings, the power of the fellowship. And that's there to support us. Now, again, I tried for years, 20 years as a matter of fact, to get better just using the power of the meetings. I would sit at the meetings and hope that something would rub off on me, and it never did. I could get periods of sobriety, but I would always, my emotions would build up till I had no choice except to take that drink. So the last part of the chapter, there is a solution. He tells us that we're going to need both powers, the power of the fellowship and the power of the vital spiritual experience. And we read Appendix 2 last week, which told us that the spiritual awakening is the same thing as a spiritual experience, same thing as a personality transformation. And Dr. Silkworth, the scientist, called it a psychic change. And what happens is when we do the work in the book, we're going to, in 3 or 4 months, what happened to me and what I see happen to most people is we have this awakening, and it happens in the 3 or 4 months. Years of therapy, years of meetings could not accomplish what takes place in just a matter of months when we do the work in the book. And so it's going to change the way we think, it's going to change the way we act, it's going to change the way we feel. Our ideas, our attitudes and emotions are going to be cast aside, and new ones are going to take their place. So our little sheet here just kind of shows the older members surrounding the new member. And the new member is going to get strength and support from the older members, but it's a two-way street because we older members also get that support from the newer members, right? We're gonna take the newer member. We're gonna help them to believe. We're gonna help them to be willing to do the action. They're gonna do the work. They're gonna investigate, go through the steps. And then it's going to revolutionize the whole attitude toward life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe. And again, they call it a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. And I mean, I was thinking today, my first treatment was in 1987. About 2 months ago, I got my 6-year chip. And I started working the steps about 5.5 years ago when I was just about ready to start drinking again. This program really does work. And I make sure everybody knows that meetings and fellowship alone, if you're a real alcoholic, that's not going to do the job for you. And I got 20 years to prove it. I see members relapsing over and over and over, and they just go to meetings, more meetings, but they never do the work in the book. But when they finally do the work in the book, all of a sudden I can see the eyes light up. I can see the cash register go cha-ching, and they get better. So this is what it is. And again, I had, when I went through my first Code Blue, because I was too afraid to ask somebody to sponsor me. And when I ran out of that meeting and they chased me down and brought me back in, they assigned me a sponsor who was 25 years younger than me. and we both had 7 months of sobriety. And I said, what the hell are you guys doing to me? You're giving me a kid with only 7 months? I got 7 months. And but the fact that I didn't understand is he had done the work. He had had the spiritual awakening, and I had not. Therefore, he was able to help me. And in fact, he did. He heard my 5th step, and we did 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. And I got more help from an older member with steps 8 and 9, because that's a little bit more tricky, and I wanted somebody with a little bit more experience. But that's our solution, is to use both powers, not just one power, right? So, did anybody do their assignments? We have time just for a couple, and if you're brave, because you're going to be recorded, so if you don't want to give your name, that's okay. But why don't you read Andrew, since you're right here, read your God is and your God isn't list.
God is patient, all-loving, considerate, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. I was obviously thinking of those words then. Caring, humble, careful, joyous, helpful, guidance, forgiving, willing, always available, balanced, a good listener, open-minded, honest. God is faith, good, and present.
Okay, and then God isn't?
Resentful, hateful, punishing, slothful, forgetful, doting, angry, vain, egotistical, boastful, opinionated, regretful, ignorant, or oscillating.
Okay, so then he's got his in his notebook, so I'm not going to do it, but when I did that at my first Code Blue, and the guy running it said, hey, that's pretty, because I had a list very similar to that. He said, let me see that list for a minute. And then he ripped it in half, and he gave me the God is part, and he said, start asking this God for help. Right? So that's kind of what I want everybody to do, because it is a God of our own conception. It is not a religious God. I mean, it's not something we learn at the church. But if you do, that's okay. But this has got to be a God that's going to be, and I really liked available to me, because I know for me, I believed that there was some kind of God, but I certainly didn't believe that I could ask that God for help, and that this God actually, would be willing to do anything for anybody, right? I just thought that he was up there. So that was really quite helpful to me to do that. How about, did you ask a few people how they found their higher power?
Yeah. 2 were Catholics, so that they've had it, in many ways. I actually went to Catholic Mass, which is nothing against Catholics. It was great, but it was a good message for 20 minutes. And then some older members, where I go to a men's meeting at St. David's, they all had very similar, except one really finds it in nature. And those guys didn't answer directly. They just said they were open, and they constantly asked. And most of these guys have 20 plus years sobriety at this meeting. They said it's constantly changing for them. Yeah. It just grows and grows. And one of them gave me, he said he'd text me it, but he didn't. And he said, it just is always expanding for them. Like what it was very narrow to start with, and now it's expanded so much because they realize, they didn't realize it starting out, but not in their wildest dreams, that they've gotten so much out of this program and from a higher power that they never would have had without it. So they said, if it starts narrow, it ends up being so expansive, it's amazing.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Couple of things then you're grateful for in the last week. It's important that we remember things that we're grateful for, because I know me as an alcoholic, I like to concentrate on the negative, and I always go straight to worst case scenarios. So it's important for me every day to think of things that I'm grateful for. So what do you got?
So I've had a tough situation, but I'm trying to, grateful for my time with my boys, because I don't get to see them often right now. Grateful for the possibility of a new life experience. Grateful to remain open-minded to all this. Grateful for a routine that is healthy and slowly forming. Grateful for the generosity of AA and my very close friends. And I am grateful that I have this time dedicated all 6 months to getting well.
Fantastic. All right. Anybody over there want to say? Go ahead. Yep, we'll do it.
What the God is?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so God is the energy, a state of mind, universal source of intelligence, truth, accessible to all, true nature, a power, laws of the universe, the way things are, the law of nature. And God isn't me, a man, a woman, punishing, and authoritarian, emotional, angry, loving, joyful, or funny.
Fantastic. Okay. How about, did you ask anybody how they found their higher power?
I did. One found it when she was 16 in a spiritual community, and it's grown and changed and expanded, like you were mentioned, to encompass. She said actually, for community, she gets more spiritual connection out of AA than she does actually out of her church home. And she said she thinks that's because the openness and honesty and vulnerability that people express.
Sure.
Her heart opening from that. And so she finds God working through her and through other people. And the other person said, well, you know, it's not going so well. so her relationship with God is slow to form. But she's still open and willing. I only asked two.
Cool. Okay. And you got a couple things you're grateful for?
Yes, my sponsees, my daughter, my friends, my main meeting, my existence, and my home.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, and that's we got a lot to read, so I'm gonna stop with those two. But you know, it's everybody if you haven't done it, do the God is and the God isn't list, because you know what? It's okay for us to come up with our own conception of God. You know, and I really like you know, loving, available to me, wants what's best for me, knows what's best for me and I don't, right? Things of that nature. And you know, the God isn't was pretty much the way I was living before I came into these rooms. You know, and I too, the main thing I'm grateful for is the people in my life, because 6 years ago, it was me, myself, and I. That was it. I knew a couple of drug dealers and some people at the liquor store. Everybody at work hated my guts, and so you know, the people in my life that I have today are just wonderful. I mean, the first time in my life I was able to buy a house. You know, getting sober, and one thing that I just absolutely am so grateful for. I would wake up every hour and a half shaken, and I mean, I can sleep through the night now. And I mean, getting sleep is just so wonderful. So those are just a couple of things I was grateful for. So, okay, guys, we are on more about alcoholism, and I love this chapter because I mean, these guys, you know, the first time I read it, I didn't see any similarities. But you know, the more I read through this, the more I see myself in all of the examples that they give to us. So what Bill's done is, you know, Bill gave us his story, an example of somebody who's got the disease, how it progressed and how he ultimately recovered. Last week he gave us what the solution is. The solution, you know, is using both powers, the powers of the meeting, people coming together to share a common problem, tremendous power, but also the power of the vital spiritual experience that we get through the program of action in the book. So he gives us the solution that we need if we're a real alcoholic to get better. In chapter 3, Bill's going to tell us what happens to us when we do not seek that spiritual solution, right? So can somebody read step 2 that's over there? Just look up and read step 2.
Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Okay, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So that statement kind of indicates that we're a little bit insane. And I know, you know, I came in and a lot of AAs come in and they're offended by that statement, right? Restore me to sanity, right? Some people say, hey, I do crazy things when I'm drunk. I'm not insane. You know, I remember what I did. You know, that's not what they mean. That's not what they mean. And as far as the stupid things we do when we're drunk, any mind that has a lot of alcohol in it, alcohol lowers the inhibitions. So we're going to do stupid things. So, you know, we look up, and I'm stealing this from Joe and Charlie, you look up sanity in the dictionary, and sanity, what it means wholeness of mind or completeness of mind, right? So if we're sane, we can see the truth, we can make decisions based on the truth, and generally things are going to come out okay. Now, an insane mind is less than whole. An insane mind cannot always see the truth. Sometimes we make a decision based upon a lie, and then things can get pretty lousy, right? Now, insane does not mean that we're crazy. Crazy means that we've lost more than half of our marbles and we should be locked up for our safety and the safety of others. Insanity simply means less than whole. And I love Charlie from Joe and Charlie's example of this. He says if you've got a pie and it's cut into 10 pieces and you give away one piece, you've got 90% of the pie. If you give away another piece, you still have 80% of the pie left. So insanity doesn't mean you're all gone. It just means you're not quite all here. And when it comes to alcohol, sometimes we're not all here. We make a decision based upon a lie, right? And then the next day or that night, we run into the truth, and life can become an absolute living hell, right? We believe that we can safely drink, or maybe it's going to be different. And we wake up, we got another hell of a mess on our hands, right? So insanity doesn't mean we're all gone. It's just that we're not quite all here. So let's go to chapter 3, page 30. Okay, so most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Okay, we're going to highlight the next 3 lines. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. Okay, the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession, circle obsession, of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion, circle illusion, is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity, circle insanity, or death, and circle death. We're going to highlight the whole next little paragraph here. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion, and circle that word delusion, that we are like other people or presently may be, has to be smashed. I'm supposed to smash my book down or make a loud noise there. So we've got, we circled death too, but let's look at those 4 words: obsession, illusion, insanity, and delusion, right? You look at those and maybe you're thinking that maybe Bill's talking about 4 different things, but he's actually talking about the same exact thing there, right? So obsession, when we look it up, it means a disturbing preoccupation with an idea or feeling. Okay, remember, our obsession to drink from time to time overcomes all ideas to the contrary, and we think it's okay to take that first drink. So it's a disturbing preoccupation with an idea or feeling. Illusion, mistaken idea, right? You get an illusionist up there, and through sleight of hand, he's going to make you believe something that's not true. Insanity, foolish, not mentally sound. So if we're not mentally sound, we're gonna make some decisions and do some things that are going to come back to bite us. Delusion, persistent belief in something false, right? My delusion, I somehow would delude myself. I just got out of jail, and I would delude myself into thinking it's okay to take just a couple of drinks, right? So all of these terms mean the same thing. They mean to believe a lie, right? We believe a lie and we take that first doggone drink, right? Okay, I forgot to have you write a little something too. So we're going to go up to the to where it says, therefore it is not surprising, the first part that we highlighted. Next to that, we're going to write twofold disease, mind and body. Twofold disease, mind and body. And that's just, we were real alcoholics. And we looked at that. We looked at the twofold disease in depth in the doctor's opinion. The delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. Highlight that first sentence. We know that no real alcoholic ever, circle ever, recovers control. All of us felt at times we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, highlight, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. right? Just a demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Highlight that last sentence. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. And that's true even when we go through long periods of sobriety. Our disease progresses even though we're not drinking. So after never better, write progressive disease. Progressive disease. Okay, and then right where it says, we're going to go back up to where the step 1, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. Okay, so we're going to write some things off to the left there. Write step 1 instructions. Step 1 instructions. Ask sponsee, right? Because we get out of here, we're going to be taking other people through this book. So right here, ask sponsee, and I want you to ask yourselves if they think they have another drink in them. Ask sponsee if they think they have another drink in them. Step 1 instructions, ask sponsee if they think they have another drink in them. Okay. If yes, go back to doctor's opinion. Okay, so in other words, that means, do you think that maybe you can drink successfully? Maybe you can drink without getting in trouble. Maybe you think you can drink without burning your life to the ground, right? So if they think they have another drink in them, and if yes, go back to doctor's opinion. Obviously, they did not get enough out of the doctor's opinion, so we got to go through and we got to look at that again to see why we can never drink anything successfully again. There was this a documentary on HBO. I saw it about 6 months ago. It was unbelievable, man. It's called Risky Drinking. And one of the guys in there, I don't know how, he spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and I would have too. He had a team of doctors at an institute in California, and they were going to teach this guy how to control his drinking while drinking. Now, we read in the doctor's opinion that once we start drinking, something happens and we can't control what we take. But this guy paid, I don't know how much, and they thought they could teach him how to drink successfully. And they showed the guy when he got back to Jamaica, who he's living in Jamaica, and they showed him on film, and he had about 4 bottles of rum on there, and he had a little measuring glass, and he was pouring it and drinking it down, right? So it doesn't work, but there are actually places out there that are suckering us into spending a lot of money to teach us how to drink, right? Well, we saw in the doctor's opinion that doesn't work for the real alcoholic. So we can't do it. Because over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. We are like men. Oh, by the way, at the bottom of the page, write honesty is principle behind step 1. Honesty is principle behind step 1. So, we're not being honest with other people. Well, hopefully we are. What we're going to do is we're going to fully concede to our innermost selves that we're alcoholics, that we have this twofold disease. And because we have it, we had better do this program of action or we're going to die, right? You know what? I say this over and over again with all the treatment centers in the U.S., with all the AA meetings all over the place, around-the-clock meetings, well over 90% of alcoholics in the United States are still dying drunk. Right? So, I mean, we here in these rooms are quite lucky. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. So next to that, we're going to write off to the right, don't ever think it's okay to drink. And again, for we alcoholics, that's NyQuil, that's near beer, rum cake, anything that has a little bit of alcohol in it. For me, pills from the dentist or codeine in the cough syrup. I got to be careful. I don't want to take any of that stuff because it alters my mind and I want more. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics, underline real alcoholics, are not going to believe they are in that class. By every form, highlight this, by every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exception to the rule. Okay, so stop highlighting there. Next to exceptions of the rule, write denial. Denial. You know, and I always, you know, that was me. I mean, there's no way. I'm smarter than you. I'm better than you. I just got to lay off the sauce for a little bit, right? Therefore, non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Highlight that last sentence. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. That's our great obsession. We think that we're like other people. That's one of our great delusions. We think we're like other people and we're not. Here are some methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, aka treatment centers, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums, aka treatment centers. We could increase the list ad infinitum. So next to that paragraph, we're going to write how it doesn't work. A little further on, we got how it works. Right here, we're going to write how it doesn't work. Okay, and then we're going to have another ask sponsee. After we've read this, we're going to write ask sponsee to fully concede they are alcoholic. Right? And guys, ask yourself this too. You know, and I mean, if there's any, and I didn't have you highlight any of that paragraph, but if there's anything in there that relates to you, highlight it, right? Never drinking, I'm never going to drink alone. I won't drink in the morning, right? If you've ever done this, highlight it for you. But ask sponsee to fully concede they are alcoholic, right? When you're right at this point. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Okay, so next to this paragraph, we're going to write, let them make decision if they are alcoholic. Again, this is referring to your sponsee and yourselves. Let them make decision if they are alcoholic. I know that from the time I was 15 years old, you know, girlfriends told me that I drank too much. Maybe I'm an alcoholic, and of course everybody in my family and all of my employers and college professors and everything, they all told me I was an alcoholic and I didn't like it. And I didn't believe it. So we have to let them come to their own decision that they're alcoholic, right? Because it says we've got to concede to our innermost selves. Because if we're not honest with ourselves, we're not going to do this work, right? Because this work, I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy. But you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Okay, so next to that, just write first test and draw a little arrow. This is the first test. So I'm sorry, after diagnose yourself, put a little line. And that's where it starts. Step over to the nearest bar room. That's first test to see if you're alcoholic. Step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to decide if you are honest, circle honest, with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. So that's test number one. You know, if back in the day, and of course I don't want anybody to do that, right? But back in the day, people that would want to go to the early AA meetings, and they weren't sure they were alcoholic, they said, well, go try this. That was the first test, right? We're going to highlight the next 4 lines. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. It's right to there. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. By the way, back in the early 1940s, the reason that in the foreword, I believe, to the second edition, it says 50% of people who came to AA and really tried got sober at once. 25% of people sobered up after some relapses, right? That's a 75% success rate. Now, there's a little difference, though, between what they did then and what we do now. Today we're lucky if we get a 5%, I think, people staying sober who come to meetings. Back then, they would take the alcoholics up to Dr. Bob's, up to his top bedroom, and they would sit down and talk with the alcoholic, and the alcoholic would have to convince the other members that they thought they were an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, that they had the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body. And if this person was able to convince the older members that he really thought he was an alcoholic and was willing to do anything to stop, they would say, okay, come to our meetings. Right? Today, people can come into AA meetings and they can sit around relapsing for years and we don't ask them to do a goddamn thing. We sit around and watch them die, right? So they did things a little bit different back then, and that's why they had such a great success rate. So we're going to draw a little line under desire to do so, and underneath the line, right, first case. We're going to get 4 cases in this chapter of people who are going to believe the delusion, the illusion. They're going to believe the lie. So this is the first case. And you can just underline a man of 30. That's what it's called. The case is called a man of 30. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Okay, underline this next little sentence. Once he started, he had no control whatever. So underline that. Next to it, write physical allergy. That's the physical allergy. That's why these controlled drinking spas don't work. If I was an evil, dishonest person, I would start one. I'd be a millionaire. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Okay, let's highlight. Actually, we're going to highlight just to the end of the page. Then he fell victim to a belief, and circle that word belief, which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Okay, so highlight to the bottom of the page, but next to the first, what I just read, in quotation marks, write the big lie. Right? Then he fell victim to a belief, which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. And for me, that might be, it might be a month, it might be 6 months. Once I actually got a year. And I had that belief every single time, that I could drink like other people. I mean, look at me. There's no way an alcoholic could stay sober for 6 months. Out came his carpet slippers in a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital. Meantime, highlight the next sentence here. It's, I guess, 2.5 lines. Then, gathering all his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Okay, so next to that, we're going to write crossed invisible line. Crossed invisible line. Right? We saw the physical allergy. Now we're seeing the obsession of the mind. Right? He's got it, man. Crossed invisible line. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. Okay? This case contains a powerful lesson. Highlight the next sentence. Most of us have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. There's that doggone lie again, right? They gave it to us twice. But here is a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. Okay, we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. Very important stuff here. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must, circle must, be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. Okay, so next to that, what we just highlighted, we're going to ask sponsee this, right? So ask your sponsee this, and ask yourself this too. And what that is, because hopefully you're going to be working with somebody and they're going to get some sobriety. Do you have any lurking notion that someday you're going to be able to drink successfully? I mean, that's what it means, that we'll be immune to alcohol. Right? So ask sponsee this and ask yourself this. Now, a lot of people say to me, John, this is ridiculous. This book, there's no way that, stuff like this ever happened. They're making this up. So I'm going to read the first two paragraphs from a Star Tribune article dated October 25th, 2016. Gerald Mose stayed sober for nearly 3 decades. But 6 months after he fell off the wagon, his final binge ended in tragedy. On a September night 2 years ago, Mose hit 4 bars and downed at least 21 drinks in 7 hours before driving a car down the wrong way of a divided highway in Rochester, where he hit another car head-on, killing a 9-year-old boy and paralyzing the boy's 7-year-old cousin. After 30 years, Gerald Mose thought he could drink like other men. Look what happened. So this stuff is not, he's not making it up. This is real stuff. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own willpower. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop, and hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find he can win out. Several of our crowd, underline our crowd, and that just means alcoholics, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. Let's see here. I got some notes real quick, if I can find them. Okay, so the man of 30, right? The man of 30 is the real problem in this guy's body, which ensures that he cannot drink? Or is this problem in his mind, which tells him that after 25 years of sobriety, it's okay to take a drink, right? He can drink like other men. The real problem exists in his mind, which tells him it's okay to drink after 25 years, not in his body, which ensures he can't. And again, never have we seen a case where an alcoholic can ever be able to drink like a normal man. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Men of 30 or less had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. We're going to highlight the next 3 lines. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink a long time, nor take the quantity some of us have had. This is particularly true of women. So here I am. I'm at about 4 months sober. I'm going to a meeting every night. I'm not working these steps. And I'm at a speaker meeting, and this woman gets up there and she's talking, and her whole drinking history was 1 year. She talked about how she started drinking, and then she talked about how at the end of that first year, her life had reached rock bottom, right? And then how she recovered and went through the steps. And here I am in the back row thinking, this is ridiculous. I drank for over 30 years. I'm not going to sit here and listen to her. She's not a real alcoholic. That's me in the back row thinking, right? All of a sudden, about 3 months later, I'm going through a code blue, and we get to this sentence right here where it says, this is particularly true of women. And then I thought about what she said, and I remembered how she talked about how the disease progressed, how it took over her life, how it almost killed her, and how she reached bottom. And I said, my God, that woman was an alcoholic just like me, right? So we got to be careful that we don't scoff when we're listening to people up there. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. This gal just was gone beyond recall in 1. And again, the incredible demoralization and hopelessness I remember, and that was exactly where I was at. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. Right? That's the obsession. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try to get them to see it. True when this book was first published, but a 2007 U.S.-Canada membership survey showed about 1/13 of AAs were 30 and under. As we look back, we feel we have gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether he has entered this dangerous area, highlight just a year, just 2 little lines here. Let him try leaving liquor alone for a year. Highlight that little bit and write second test. That's the second test, right? If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, highlight the next 5 words. There is scant chance of success. So I've got people that I work with, they're alcoholics. And, I don't try that first test on them, because they're not necessarily trying to stop. But, when we're talking about their drinking, I say, well, do you think you could give up liquor for a year? And they think, of course I could. Well, why don't you try giving it up for a year? Well, I wouldn't want to do that. That would impinge on my life and the life of my friends. Okay, why don't you try giving up liquor for 3 months? Well, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to give up liquor for 3 months. I mean, again, I'm not an alcoholic. Why should I do such a thing? I'm like, okay, how about giving up liquor for 2 weeks? It's like, well, no, we're going out to the bars this Saturday night with all our friends. So, I mean, a lot of people are not willing to take the second test. So if they are able to stop drinking for a year without meetings and without the steps, perhaps they're not an alcoholic. But, we never know, because look at the man of 30. Look at Gerald Mose. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remain sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. Remember, we talked about how some people drink themselves into alcoholism. The first time I drank, the allergy presented itself, and I kept going back, and I blacked out and threw up. Some people drink safely for years, but eventually they cross that line, and what the hell's the difference? Once we come into these rooms, we're all in the same boat. So let's highlight to just to the end of the paragraph. We think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. Some will be drunk the day after making their resolutions, most of them within a few weeks, right? If you can get them to make that resolution. For those who are unable to drink moderately, and remember we talked about the moderate drinker. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. Underline this next sentence. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. So underline that. Off to the left, we've got another Ask Sponsee. Ask Sponsee here, right after that sentence, do you want to stop for good? We're just going to come right out and ask them as we're going through the book. Do you want to stop for good? Right? That's why I think it's so important to get people started on these steps rather quickly. Maybe they've been in jail for the last week. We get them out of there and we start taking them through this book. We got to get them when they're low and they're willing to do this work, right? Because we alcoholics we think, if we stay dry for a month, we think that we can lick anything, right? Whether such a person can quit upon, underline, a non-spiritual basis, just that little bit. Next to it, write own willpower. That's what a non-spiritual basis is. Whether such a person can quit on a non-spiritual basis, own willpower, depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Many of us felt that we had plenty of character. There was a tremendous urge to cease forever. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. Yet we found it impossible. This is the baffling feature of alcoholism as we know it. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. So next to that, we're going to write obsession/powerlessness over disease. Obsession/powerlessness over disease. I mean, I'll never forget, Mom, I'm never going to drink again. Mom, I promise you. And when I said that, I believed it, and I meant it, and I was sure I could do it. Right? Didn't happen. Highlight the next two lines as well. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? That's very important. We've got to convince people that they're a real alcoholic, or they're not going to want to do the work. The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcoholic sufferers and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe, underline the next three lines, we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking. For obviously this is the crux of the problem. So we're going to look into the mind of some people right before they take that first drink. What sort of thinking, circle thinking, dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time, underline, the desperate experiment of the first drink. Just that little bit there. Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Circle thinking. And then off to the right, we're going to write, thinking is his/her problem. Thinking is his/her problem.